and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for tuning in to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to that on the reg, make sure you go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple and Spotify. When you get there, rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe, because if you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is not one right now, but I will explain why in just a second. But if you go over to the YouTube channel, the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel, and you hit the subscription, the subscribe button, and then hit that notification bell, you'll be notified when we go live, and you can come hang out with us and watch the show live here. It's always a ton of fun. We love going back and forth with everybody. And at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach writes on the internet. Okay. It is not Monday, Zach. And we didn't have a show last week. That is because I was in Canada. I was up in Toronto, Niagara Falls this last week. Went and saw the eclipse. Actually, I see Big Ten Jeff is already in here. Big Ten Jeff, I was up in your neck of the woods. I guess I don't even know if he actually lives in Ohio. He's just an Ohio State fan. But I went and saw the eclipse there, then went up to Canada. And at one point, we were in a bar, and Tennessee's baseball game was on. And I was like, you guys have the SEC network? The guy was like, what? What are you talking about? It's like, no, like the Southeastern Conference, like college sports. He's like, no, we don't do university sports up here. So didn't get to see as much as I would like, but a ton of fun on that trip. What is up, Zach?
Yeah, I can't believe that college baseball isn't a huge thing up there. Just completely shocking. Would have never guessed that.
We did talk to just some locals there just over the course of everything that we did, and they did say that there's college hockey.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, that goes without saying. And I will say this about Toronto, and specifically the Hockey Hall of Fame, probably the best sports museum I've been to. I have not been to the baseball museum in Cooperstown. I think you have. Zach,
yeah, I
went
there last summer. Actually, it's good.
But I would, no offense to the College Football Hall of Fame, hockey has you way beat. Actually, I've been to both of those. The fun at the College Football Hall of Fame, but it was really serious. They did a great job. So I'll shout that out. If you ever get the chance, you're in Canada, go there. But otherwise, we got to get down to the business that happened since we've been gone. Big Ten Jeff says, what part of Ohio? It's a place called North Baltimore, Ohio. It was the absolute middle of nowhere. Although I did drive through Columbus on the way back from all of that. Anywho.
And just real quick, Jeff, you will not appreciate this. Charlie had lots of or some good things to say about Ann Arbor. So
I did.
There, so
I will say, so we went, that whole thing was driven. And we did like this big loop around since we were going up for the eclipse. We just went up to Canada and came back. And we went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, saw Michigan Stadium. Really lovely town. It really, genuinely, we had Zingerman's Deli, super good. And so
he's never heard of it.
Oh boy, must be Amish country. Well, regardless, great
I've never
trip.
heard of North Baltimore either, for the record. So
it is, like I said, absolute middle of nowhere. We stood in the parking lot of a golf course out there and watched the eclipse with a bunch of strangers, and it was pretty fun. Yeah. So there was that. But while I was gone, so much stuff happened. Like it was like the floodgates opened up. There really hadn't been that much. I was like, oh, there won't be that much for that week that I can't do it. And no, there was so much stuff. And kind of unexpected guys from the basketball team hit the transfer portal. We have transfer portal news for the football team today. You had the orange and white game. Of course, we knew that was going to happen. And probably the biggest one that I don't know that we're going to spend a ton of time on this, but Kentucky and their basketball coach situation, they get a new basketball coach. And I think We'll have to mention that for a little bit also on tonight's show. But we're going to discuss it all as we always do here on the Big Orange Podcast. But we'll do that right after I tell you about our first great sponsor. And that, as always, is the good folks at Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. All right. Orange and white game happened over the weekend. And I don't want to sound like a negative Nelly of sorts, but I feel like I say this every year. With spring football in general, I kind of feel this way. There's just not that much to take away from it when you watch it, because when you watch it, I don't want to say that they've set it up to sort of, it's not disrespectful. That's a step too far. But it's kind of like I watch it and go, what are we doing here? And they close practices, so you can't really see that much. And I almost feel dumb if I extrapolate too much from it. I will put it that way. If I go in there and I try to go like, oh, did you see that this and that and this dude did that? There, some stuff certainly happened. You saw some serious athleticism from some guys that you wanted to see it from, and you saw. We saw Nico, and he didn't play that well. He didn't play that well. Is he? He's not. I'll start here. Zach, is Gaston Moore going to be the starter?
Didn't we do that last year when me and you were out there?
I think so.
I think I told this last year. Maybe not. I can't remember. But the first spring game I ever covered, like worked, was 2013. Butch Jones' first spring game. Alden Hill, running back, had a big game, like 100 yards, and oblivious me is like, oh, that's impressive. And later that summer at the media day right before the season starts in August, I talked to Alden Hill. I was like one of the only guys over there talking to him. Do this interview, write this big feature on him. Like, watch out for this guy. And I don't even think he hardly got like 15 carries that season playing. And Tennessee's running game wasn't fantastic. It was the Marlon Lane, Rajon Neal days. I mean, it was okay, but that was the moment I was like, okay, learned it the hard way. Don't take too much from these spring games because you will look like a fool later on. And it's kind of been my rule to live by since then.
Absolutely. Like Jeff is saying in the comments, he said that the O-line looked like garbage. Nico was running like crazy.
Starters weren't playing for the offensive line.
Exactly.
As it was, no clue who their left guard is going to be. So, and not to totally dismiss that, because I do think depth could be a concern there for the offensive line. Everybody stays healthy, they should be okay. You've got good tackles. You have a really good right guard, experienced in Javonte Spraggins. Obviously, we know what Cooper Mays provides. Hopefully, you figure out your left guard situation. Beyond that, though, guys start getting hurt. Then you kind of run into some trouble then. And we saw that last season when Cooper Mays missed the first couple of games of the year. So don't want to totally dismiss that. I think they'll be okay as long as everyone stays healthy, especially with this offense and style of offense. But you run into some injuries. It could definitely be a concern this season.
No doubt about it. It was a concern last year. It's going to continue to be a concern now. And that I didn't need to see the spring game to know that. I would put it that way. That's a place of concern. I think you saw, DBs maybe still not settled there. And that kind of is what it is. But otherwise, people were bringing up that Nico didn't look his best. I put next to no stock in that at all. They're not going to do anything serious with him in that game like they would do in an actual regular season game. And I mean, it was borderline. It was borderline even as a scrimmage. Like it just.
And I would say that the close scrimmages are probably include a lot more action, than what we saw in that.
Exactly. This was purely for the 10,000 lucky folks that got to be in there, and I you got to appreciate the university for putting it on and giving fans a chance to see everybody up close and personal there during spring ball. But it still, I just always walk away and say I'm not gonna pull much from it, because you'll end up just either hyping up a guy that's never gonna see field time, that being concerned about a guy that you never should have been concerned about. It's kind of just a fruitless pursuit there. So there was that. Now, what did happen after the spring game? Well, I'll say this just quickly. Any quotes, anything from the coaches? I listened to Heupel. Didn't hear a lot from Heupel there. I don't know if you had any interesting tidbits there from what
Yeah, I
players
mean,
and
it
coaches
was
said.
pretty low key, non exciting media sessions. Not a lot going on. We know Heupel's not going to say a lot. I always like his personality. I like the way he handles, the media sessions. He's not mundane to the point where it's like listening to Butch Jones, where it's just, God, get this over with. But he also doesn't really reveal anything. He uses a lot of words. Like, for example, they asked him about the in-helmet communication devices. Like last month, Lane Kiffin said, "Hey, man, these things, depending on what you do offensively, they can be kind of like a cheat code, even if you run some tempo." Heupel, on the other hand, is like, yeah, we put some in the helmets. We've tinkered with them. That'll be a process that unfolds as we get closer to the season and we kind of figure out what could work, what might not work, just dancing all around it, giving away absolutely nothing. I don't think we'll ever know fully how Tennessee utilizes those things. I do think they will, real quick. I think that'll be something that Joey Hosley's in the booth and he's seeing something defensively, leverage wise, that maybe Nico's not seeing, or somebody on the field. It's like, hey, this guy's doing that every play. Exploit that. Something that simple. And,
Yeah.
that little quick back and forth, or not really back and forth because it's just the coach talking to the player, but that could be definitely beneficial for this offense. So I think it'll be something they use. I don't think it'll be their primary way of calling signals, but I don't think Heupel wants to give any of that away.
Yeah, I would almost say how cagey he was about it almost made me excited.
Yeah, he's been
about
asked
the
a lot about
prospects
it,
there.
and he's
Yeah.
danced around it all off season. He doesn't want to discuss it really at all.
No, because when you look at the way that he runs that offense, the potential for that to be a serious weapon for this team is obvious.
Well, he's
I think
secretive about the entire offense anyway. Like, he never goes very in depth discussing, the intricacies behind it.
no, and he never will. That's not the style that he plays there. But on the whole, just not a ton to draw from it. While it was still fun, great to see everybody out there, and that was great. Weather ended up being really nice. That was cool.
Lots of former Vols back too. Josh Dobbs,
Yep.
Trey Smith, Khalil McKenzie, Juwan Jennings. So there were some big names came back, which is cool to see. A lot of Butch Jones era guys that have really bought into. You say what you will about Butch, but Dobbs, some of those guys still are friendly with Butch and got along with him, and their own personal relationships. So they've come back and really bought into the Heupel effect here.
They definitely have. Always great to see that. So nice, especially after you've had, Dooley and some of those guys that with everything that they did, former players. That's nice to see. Fun times all around, even if there is not a ton to draw from it. Now, what did happen after the spring game? The portal opened and saw Elijah Herring jump in to the portal, and I will say, you don't want to see guys transfer away, especially when you're closing in on actually starting to get prepared for the season itself. But not a guy that anybody was overly impressed with last year. At the same time, his brother is also on the team, and his brother has a bit of a higher ceiling, we think. What were your thoughts on that one, Zach?
Yeah, it was something that had been rumored a little bit throughout the course of the offseason. He never, he didn't go in the portal right after the season, but that door was never closed. And obviously he's chosen to walk through it. Definitely not shocking with, he's all the headlines. I mean, I saw one from ESPN. I think even On3 had one, like their national site. It was like Tennessee's leading tackler hits the portal. And like, yeah, that's true. He was the leading tackler last year, but it was kind of by default. With Keenan Peely out, he was forced into action. Aaron Beasley didn't play quite as well last season as he had in 2022. So there was some factors that kind of played into the reason he led the team in tackling. It's not like he had an AJ Johnson type year where he's 140 tackles. It was like 80. It wasn't. And look, we watched Elijah Herring play. He not the fastest guy out there, not very good in coverage. He improved at times, but he still had some missed assignments out there that were frustrating and kind of some big moments. So not a guy with Keenan Peely coming back and some of the talent you have, like Arian Carter, who really seems to be figuring out how to play linebacker. Because that's a guy that wasn't even at Tennessee until last summer. Started playing linebacker at like his senior year of high school. Not a lot of experience there. T-Lander, you got a lot of talent there at linebacker, and Herring just wasn't. I mean, he was a backup really without a guaranteed role. Even as a backup, it's not like he was going to be a rotational guy. He was just kind of waiting on somebody to go down. So it makes sense. As for Caleb Herring, doesn't seem like he's, eager to hit the portal. He's a guy that's Josh Heupel's raved about, this offseason already. He was not dead. It wasn't like he was automatic to Tennessee just because his brother went there anyway during the recruiting process. I don't think that's these go hand in hand type deal. I think, Caleb Herring's going to pave his own way and Elijah Herring's going to try to go somewhere outside of the SEC and pave his own way as well.
Caleb did tweet about it. If I did, I think I saw that and said something like, "You're in God's hands."
Yeah,
just kind of innocuous. Didn't say a lot about it. I would say I'm not overly worried about that situation because exactly what you said. The playing time looked like it had probably taken its course for Elijah Herring with just the way things were shaping back up with Peely coming back. So.
And honestly, if you're Caleb Herring, you're a sophomore, and you're going to get probably some decent time in that rotation to D end, and you're going to be playing on the opposite side of James Pierce. That's a huge opportunity that only one team in the country can provide at this moment. As far as somebody as talented as Pierce, you don't walk away from that.
Definitely, no doubt about that. Jason does bring up in the comments. He said, "I'm a little worried about our running game. I know a lot of starters were out." But still expecting a drop off from last year. Yeah, they didn't look amazing in that spring game.
Kind of like, which narrative do you want to go with there? Is the run game bad? Is the defensive line just awesome? I mean, we have heard a lot about this defensive line. I do think they're really, really good. They were really good last year. They should only be better this year. But at the same time, Tennessee, Jalen Wright's probably going to be like a third or fourth round pick at this point. I mean, he's being mocked in the third round in a lot of the latest mock drafts. I saw one yesterday from ESPN. Jabari Small wasn't as electric as Jalen Wright or Dylan Sampson. Really good player, great in pass protection, was slippery, could pick up chunk yardage at times too. He just didn't have that real 50, 60, 70-yard breakaway speed. Those are pretty talented players to lose, and you don't have a lot of experience to replace them with. You don't know if Cam Seldon's going to be fully healthy by the regular season. I mean, I do think there's reason for some concern, not like, oh my God, this is going to sink the season type deal, but yeah, how good is the running game going to be? Is it going to be as good as last season? Do they need to go get a guy from the portal? I think they probably should. They don't have a lot of returning carries. I mean, it's like Khalifa Keith had about 11 carries, and that's the only person behind Sampson that has any collegiate carries at this point. So I think it might be wise to take a look around the portal and see if somebody fits your system, fits your culture. If they do, I think it's probably a good thing to try to add them to the roster.
I would definitely agree there. Sampson is a dog. I think there's no concern there. But just losing that two-headed monster that you had and then had Sampson in addition to them, I mean, that's a powerful running back room.
Keeps everybody fresh, too.
Exactly. And 2/3 of that is gone now. A very real concern, for sure, along with the depth of the offensive line and a few other things on this team. But kind of discussions for a little close to the season, probably when we get a better idea because of the factors like you're bringing up there. Do they get a guy out of the transfer portal? Very real possibility there. I mean, have we heard any rumblings that they're doing that? No, not necessarily, but it just makes sense. There's a few spots on this team where something like that could make sense. And I hope they do make those moves. And obviously now the portal is actually open. Time for the Wild West to sort of begin here. And
there is a son of a former Tennessee player that happens to be running back that entered the transfer portal, Dallin Hayden. So
Hello, somebody.
maybe.
Come on down here.
Yeah.
Love Aaron Hayden, one of the greats, and still a great dude, and would love to have his son in orange and white because you've missed on all of them so far. Please come down here. Have you seen any smoke around that? I don't.
Not really, but it's really just now kind of getting going. The portal just officially opened this morning. It runs through April 30th, and you don't have to. There's really no rush at this point. I mean, you want to go wherever you want to go, of course, but spring practice is over. You're not you can be in meetings or whatever they do in the off season, lifting, but you can't get really into the offense onto the field until late July, early August. So it's not as rushed as it is in the wintertime, I don't think, for everybody.
No doubt about it. So, now I won't open up any more cans of worms there. Anything else with football before we move on to talk about everything that happened with the transfer portal with Tennessee basketball too? We got to get to that.
I think we quickly learned that 5-star guys, like legit 5-star guys, high-end 4-star guys that probably could be 5 stars, like they just look different immediately. And I remember, I guess it was Ramon Foster we had on back last fall at one point, was telling us about Eric Berry and how they just knew, like from the moment that he walked in, that he was different, that he was going to be a dude. It feels like Boo Carter, Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley, like those are those types of guys, especially Boo Carter, especially Mike Matthews. I mean, it's like they've showed up, and not only are they talented, but the work ethic is there. I mean, everything we've heard is these guys are like front and center in every drill. They want to do it. They want to do it right. It was Mike Eckler said, I don't care if Boo's playing in front of 100,000 people or 5 people. He's the same guy. And I love that because that's the competitiveness that you have to, 5-star talent's not going to take you to a championship. You got to be a competitor, and it really feels like they got some of those dogs, and they happen to be 5-star guys. So that's fun to see. Need more of them. Definitely need more of them, especially some of these positions where they're a bit thin. But that's how you build championship teams. That's what Georgia's done. They've just collected that type of talent. Now, you got to go match them somehow. You got to find a way. And Tennessee's starting to do that. They've still got a ways to go. I don't know if they'll ever catch them. Who knows? But they got to try to.
We've said it so much when it comes to those recruiting discussions. The under the radar 3-star guys, some of them have paid off in a very serious way and have been really great for you. But at the end of the day, the truth remains those elite dudes are how you win championships.
Yeah.
Period. That is just the way that it is. Look at the teams that have won titles. That's the way that it is. I don't know necessarily another way to frame it. Michigan did it this past year. Georgia's been doing it for years at this point. Alabama with Saban has always done that. And so you got to just be there. The NIL helps for sure. And it levels that playing field at least a little bit with siphoning guys off of Georgia and Alabama and all these things, especially now with Saban gone. But it still remains that's the way you win. The proof is right there, like you said. I mean, Mike Matthews, man. He looks like the real deal. And it's Nico looks like the real deal. You can just see it. So hopefully they start getting more of those guys. Would be really nice. Okay. Now, some not so great news. So you lost Elijah Herring in the transfer portal and football. And then some really not great news with basketball. Awaka, Adu, both hitting the transfer portal. Let's talk about it, Zach, right after I tell you about Zen Sports. We've been talking about them all season long. They're the new sports betting app exclusively in Tennessee. And when you sign up for a Zen Sports account, receive up to a $1,000 no danger first wager. When you place your first bet in Zen Sports, you can be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to a $1,000 maximum if that bet loses. But there's even more good news. Zen Sports is rolling out its brand new VIP rewards program. This new VIP rewards program will allow top-tier customers to earn more bonuses, comps, and perks. VIP program is by invite only, so if you feel your Zen Sports play qualifies for VIP consideration, check out the program details at zensports.com/VIP. No other sportsbook will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support, faster withdrawals like Zen Sports. What are you waiting for? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. Zen Sports betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. That is Zen Sports. Big thanks to them. So you got a transfer in, and we'll talk about this in just a second. Darlin Stone Dubar, which, what a name. Transfer into Tennessee. But that came after you had Tobe Awaka and Jonas Adu hit the transfer portal, or have the intention to hit the transfer, whatever it is. And Adu, I would say I expected that one a little bit. He got benched in that Elite Eight game against Purdue for JP Estrella. And you can just look at that situation and say, that's tough, but you got benched for a freshman, man. Like, that can't happen. And that's, I think the official line out of the team was, he was sick. He was getting pushed around all season long. That was not. Now, against teams that didn't have strong big men, hey, he really had his moments and he could really be a strong player. But it was just, I'm not sure it was ever really going to be there in Rick's system with Adu. Maybe it would, if he could have really developed a mid-range shot, it could have been there where you could have had him as a guy that draws out the defense and can help in that way. That would have been something. Not sure that was ever really going to develop. At least it didn't develop over the course of this season. In fact, near the end of the season, I almost felt like it got worse for whatever reason. Jason says here, good riddance day. I don't know if I feel this strongly. He said, dude was soft and hard to watch, but would have liked to keep Awaka. Awaka was surprising to me because I felt like he really had a spot carved out for him next season. And maybe this was just an NIL thing where does St. John's come calling? I don't know. I haven't seen any updates on his situation because he's New York guy. I'm not sure there, but that was surprising. What do you think of those transfers out, Zach?
Yeah, the Adu, that wasn't super surprising really at all, just because the points you laid out, it just didn't seem, clearly you needed more. You get more from that position and you beat Purdue. Like, it's that simple. And with Awaka, there's kind of some rumblings out there that maybe a return's not off the table, because I think he went in the portal before Adu. So I think the feeling there is like maybe Adu's out and it's like, okay, well, I'll have a little more of an opportunity than I would have before. So that's something to watch. Maybe, I'm not saying it is going to happen. I don't know. I just know that that's something that's kind of out there. So, maybe the door's not completely closed on a Walker coming back. That'd certainly be nice to have him return, especially with everything you're losing. And then, the other two guys definitely weren't surprising at all. Freddie DeLeone and DJ Jefferson. Not shocking on either aspect there. That's just kind of college basketball, really. You're rebuilding your whole entire team every single offseason. You got like a couple of core guys that are going to stick around. Zakai Ziegler is going to be the heartbeat of this team, and then you got to go out and get a scorer to replace Dalton Connect, which maybe they did with the Dubar from Hofstra, who keeps the alliterative theme going with Zakai Ziegler and Josiah Jordan James. But it's tough. That's the reason this Rick Barnes stuff, you think about when will he retire? Right now he's energized, but I think at some point, April used to come, and you're a college basketball coach, you used to be able to chill out a bit. Like, the tournament's over, let's kind of recharge, get back through the summer and really hit the ground running. And it just never really stops at this point. It's such a year-round job. How long can you keep that up? How long can Rick Barnes keep that up? How long will he decide he wants to keep it up? And I think I said it before, it wouldn't shock me if when he does eventually retire, it's later in the summer and the fall, just because of the way Dean Smith went out at UNC back when Rick Barnes was still in the ACC. I think that's something he's always kind of carried with him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of takes that approach. Like, how do I feel when I get to August and September? But otherwise, I mean, it's kind of what we expected, that there was going to be some shuffling around. I'd be interested to see what they do though at the center position, because you got to figure something out. I feel like you've got to go get somebody, right? I mean, you feel the same way?
I do, and I hope they either you get a Waka back, because otherwise that's a requirement. You
Yeah.
have to have more. I mean, you have Cade Phillips and JP Estrella, but that's not a duo that's
And at this
carrying you
point,
in
you
SEC
can't.
basketball.
Well, you can't go into the season like, it's such a weird thing. You don't really. I mean, you develop guys, but not the same way over the course of 4 years to be a star by the time they're a senior type deal. I mean, somebody else goes and develops them essentially at this point, and you got to get somebody that's like ready to go. Like, you're not going to get another Dalton Connect, but you got to get somebody that's ready to come into your system and start being a dude from day one, not learning to be a dude. It's such a weird kind of like the whole approach of college basketball is so different from when we were growing up watching it. And it's the product that we got now, and it's fine. It's what we have, but it is, yeah, you got to go find the guy. You can't just wait on one of those guys. You can't wait to see if Estrella is going to be able to carry you as a big man. You just can't.
Dubar averaged almost 18 points at Hofstra, and then
good shooter too.
Yes, close to 40% from three, and like 7 or 8 rebounds per game too. Really nice line. You're not going to recreate that Dalton Connect magic, because that's lightning in a bottle, man.
Yeah. Those dudes don't come along often.
No, we said it all season long. Rick and his coaches didn't know that Dalton Connect was going to be that good. They didn't. They straight up did not know he was going to be that good. And that was obvious all season long, and they just kind of went with it after they realized what they had on their hands. But I think you're hoping to get a pretty serious score there. I think if Awaka stays away and goes, center is a requirement. Even if he does come back, maybe a power forward, something like that still. I would look for. I am excited about Estrella. I think Estrella's got some serious potential, and could be a really fun player. But you just gotta batten down the hatches really, and bring in as much as you can, and try to fortify every position. You're losing all of that senior leadership. You still got Sky, of course. But I think you thought, at least I don't know, maybe the coaches knew that it was happening. I think everybody thought Awaka at least was coming back, and now it's going to be a pretty different look overall. Yeah, DeLeone, I guess I didn't even mention them up top there. You did, but DeLeone, Jefferson, they're just guys that were really never going to carve out that spot on this team for whatever reason. It seemed like Jefferson just didn't fit with what Rick wanted. So
he played a little, like one game, very briefly early in the season,
almost nothing.
Never saw him again.
Yeah, that was kind of a strange situation all the way around. But now there are serious holes on this roster. We don't know exactly where they're gonna go. But I think, and Jason mentioned Carr. Cam Carr is gonna be a dude for you. He will absolutely be a dude for you. That you just haven't seen even fully blossom yet. But even this season he came in and hit some really big shots for you. So the potential is there for this basketball team to just go ahead and reload. But it is going to take some help out of the transfer portal, period. I don't think there's any question about that. And it just is what it is. As you said, it's the way of the world now in football and basketball. That is just how it's going to go with NIL and the transfer portal and all of that. The ability for these players to shift around the way that they can now. You're just going to have to deal with it. I'll be very interested to see exactly where they go. And obviously we'll talk about it as it comes. Now, staying in basketball, we're going to talk a little bit about the women's hire too, because that happened in the meantime too. I forgot to mention that up top.
Yeah.
Because it was a while ago. That was April 1st when they announced the firing of Kelly, and then the hire has been made in the meantime while I was on my trip to Canada. But first, to stay in men's basketball, your biggest rival in basketball got a new coach. Out of the blue, although realistically, it really wasn't out of the blue. The Calipari jumps to Arkansas. And that entire situation is really funny to me. Obviously, because they lose Calipari, and then everybody in Kentucky's fan base is thinking, "Oh, let's go get Dan Hurley. Give Dan Hurley back to Brink's truck up. Get Dan Hurley. Okay, well, we're not getting Dan Hurley. All right, well, let's go get Scott Drew. Okay, Scott Drew's staying. Let's who else? Nate Oates. Okay, Nate Oates is not coming. Billy Donovan. Maybe will Billy Donovan entertain something? And eventually, it falls to former Kentucky player, and Kentucky guy, but current BYU coach Mark Pope. And it made it even funnier that there was all that cope initially, specifically on Twitter. And Twitter's kind of I don't think that it's always really representative of how a full-blown fan base is feeling. But they were coping so hard, just like, can't believe this really happened. You saw some stuff from message boards, Kentucky message boards. They were just like, how are we settling for this? This is terrible. We need to fire Mitch Barnhart. But then he actually gets introduced. They the stadium is they pack out Rupp Arena and they go crazy for this guy. He has a ton of energy. He seems like a fun guy. He's never won an NCAA tournament game. His record, the postseason period between CBI and NIT is like 6-6 or something like that. At first glance, it's not going to work out. It feels a little Billy Gillespie-ish, but hey, if they're enthusiastic about it, I'm all for it. But now John Calipari's in Arkansas, a place that, at least in Bud Walton Arena, a place that's been an absolute house of horrors for Tennessee. Until this season, when somehow you went to Bud Walton and won by 30. That was always nice. But it's pretty crazy shakeup. I don't know. We hadn't gotten to talk about it, Zach. What did you think with all of that?
Well, first off, I think the first part of this, John Calipari, I mean, it looked like he might be staying at Kentucky at one point because of the huge buyout, and then kind of Kentucky wanted to move on clearly, but it was a $33 million buyout. Arkansas comes along and saves them from having to pay that bill. That part works out. But the funny part of that was the whole process to make that happen. Calipari walking down his sidewalk in public,
pushing his dog in a
residential area. Yes, pushing his dog in a stroller. No, I mean, knowing that he's going to be hounded by media immediately, and then no comment. I'm just the walking my dog line. Paul, I think the dog's name was Paul, which is even funnier for some reason. And then a day later, releases this video wearing a Kentucky blue shirt, not Kentucky logo, but Kentucky blue. This video message about needing a new voice. The whole thing was bizarre. I thought it was appropriate for John Calipari and his personality. So that's kind of like this college basketball lore that we'll talk about years from now. Then the search, I mean, I think Tennessee fans recognize this immediately because it's like, oh, we've done that. Yeah, we've shot high and then had to settle for this guy that we hadn't even thought about in years, probably. And we all did hot boards, and I had Mark Pope on there, and I think it was the very last option. And I said, this is their fail-safe. This isn't going to be the top of their list. This isn't who they want to hire, but they can if everything else, falls apart, which, Dan Hurley, why would you leave UConn? You've won back-to-back national championships. UConn's a great job. I mean, it's a great job. I mean, it's not a blue like Kentucky per se. I don't think they won their first championship till late 90s, but it's still a great job. Nate Oates, we've always thought he's going to leave for a bigger job, but you've got a really good thing going in Alabama. You just proved you could win without Brandon Miller. You really want to go to Kentucky and get sucked into that where you've got these national championship expectations. Same thing with Scott Drew at Baylor. If I was Kentucky, I would have been beating down Bruce Pearl's door, and maybe they got word that he wasn't interested or trying to convince Billy Donovan to come back to college basketball. There's several other avenues I feel like they maybe could have taken before landing on Mark Pope, but we'll see how it works out. Nobody knows how it will work out. I hate it when people, deem something a home run hire, and it's not fair to say it won't work out at all. But this guy's like, he didn't make BYU any better. Like the guy he replaced was doing the exact same thing that he did. He did not elevate the program in any way, like at all. I mean, that's something that a good coach does. Like, no matter what the situation is, yes, he'll have more resources at Kentucky. Can you do a lot with a little? And he didn't. So like, sometimes bringing the guy back helps. I mean, it works. I mean, UNC did it with Roy Williams, who was proven. Hubert Davis is doing okay. They also failed at this in the past, and they tried to hire Matt Doherty, who was, I believe, teammates with Michael Jordan back in the early 80s at Carolina. And he was awful. I mean, worst season in program history, won 8 games and got fired. It does not always, and he had done okay at Notre Dame, I believe. It does not always work out just because, we talked about this all the time. Just because you played for a school does not mean you're the right coach for the school. And if that guy wouldn't have played at Kentucky, there would have been Greg Schiano level revolts. I think it got close to that anyway. So we'll see how it works out. But I can understand Kentucky fans being less than thrilled. I can also understand them trying to rationalize the hire because I've been there, done it with Derek Dooley, Butch Jones, Jeremy Pruitt, Josh Heupel, which thank God that one worked out. I mean,
yeah, you're in it now. You gotta you gotta be hyped about it and just say, hey, this is the dude. He's never won an NCAA tournament game, and we're Kentucky. And how did we end up here? But hey, this is the guy now. So this is what we're gonna do.
Yep.
And while it has been absolutely hilarious, I would be completely lying if I said I was not hoping that it's a complete train wreck. Because the games in Rupp wouldn't be as fun if Tennessee can just roll in there and win easily. But look, I want to win easily in Rupp Arena. Like that. Who am I kidding? That would be awesome. And I'm sure Louisville is looking over there being like, oh, thank God. At least there's something there at our primary rival over there. Now that our whole deal is complete garbage, maybe they're not going to be great here. So I think
if would you have went Mark Pope or Rick Pitino, who seemed to be trying at times to get his name thrown in there with some of the comments that he made? Who would you have hired between those two?
I mean, you gotta be shameless. Pitino, I don't know if I said this on here, but we had this discussion at the SEC tournament with just the guys that I went with there. I mean, realistically, if they had kept Rick Pitino and he didn't hop to the Celtics and do everything that he did, they would have multiple more national championships. He is, in terms of X's and O's, he's one of the greats of all time.
He still wins. Like, he still wins.
Yes. He took St. John's from complete garbage to, realistically, they were a tournament team this year. They didn't make the tournament, but they were right there. And made them better. I'm sure they'll be even better next year. Lord knows if they steal Tobe Walker from Tennessee or whatever, they'll just get better with him. But he has still, like, he's a guy that's like inevitable. You're kind of like, isn't he like 80 years old? When is he going to stop coaching?
Yeah, he's been around forever.
Yeah, he still just keeps coming back and producing good basketball teams. You just got to go shameless there and just go, hey, we'll take the final years of Rick Pitino here just so we can win some basketball games and then move on to the next guy. But I like it. Ultimately, they know that the fans, they can get this dude on the cheap, and the fans will because he's a former Kentucky guy. It's not Greg Schiano where it's complete outsider.
Yeah, true.
Like they're disappointed. But he's still one of their own, and they kind of got it through gritted teeth. Be like, yeah, this is good. And so I'm sure Barnhart knows that. Honestly, I kind of thought they needed to get rid of Barnhart. Like it needed to be a full clearing out. Get rid of Barnhart, get rid of Calipari, bring a new guy, let him do the hiring. But
on a side note, I think there's a very stark difference and you can tell a lot by athletic directors in the way they handle searches. And this kind of segues into the Lady Vols thing. But Danny White, when he goes about a search, it doesn't feel like he's just out there chasing a big name. Like, so many times that's the search. It's this Wikipedia search where it's like, Mike Gundy, he's notable. People know who he is. He wins 10, 11 games a year, sometimes 9, 8, but he's always pretty good. Let's hire that guy. Well, is he a good fit? Would he fit well in this program? I mean, yeah, he's okay. That program, this is a completely different program. There's so many different factors that go beyond what did you do there versus how can you do here. And Kentucky, it felt like they were just firing darts at, oh, that's a big name. That's a big name. That's a big name. And that, we've seen before that doesn't always work out at all. So
No.
I think that's kind of like the secret sauce of Danny White as to why he's good at making these hires, because he really goes and tries to find somebody that fit. It doesn't mean it's infallible and it's always going to work out, but he tries to find somebody that fits what the program needs, what the players need, what the what the culture is currently. He tries to base his hire on that. And so far, he's, seems to be doing pretty well. He doesn't have a lot to go by just yet, but throughout his career, it seems like he gets it right more often than not.
It really does. And I hope for the Lady Vols' sake that this ends up being one of his great hires with Kim Caldwell. But it is kind of all across the board in terms of how that's handled. You get the guys that are, huge name, huge money, big splash. But I mean, Arkansas right now going out and getting Calipari, kind of a goofy move.
Yeah, I mean, what has he accomplished in recent years at Kentucky?
Exactly. One NCAA tournament win in the last 5 years.
I think I'd rather have Musselman right now. Would you?
Yeah, Musselman took you to 2 Elite Eights.
Yeah,
and ultimately, it seems like that was falling apart.
Yeah, USC is not a great basketball job. It's like it's okay, right?
It is. I
It's
could
not UCLA.
I could see the destination there, getting to live in Los Angeles compared to Fayetteville.
I guess with NIL, that is probably going to elevate that program a bit because there's so many opportunities out there.
I mean, and they already, they're getting a windfall from it. They're getting guys from Kentucky that are coming in there. Kentucky, I saw they already got some BYU guys that are switching from BYU to Kentucky. That should be interesting. Playing against the Mormons next year. But it is that dichotomy is always fascinating when it comes to coaching hires. Now let's talk about the Lady Vols hire. Kelly Harper gets canned on April Fool's Day. They announced it that day. And Danny goes on the search. You really didn't hear anything about it. And you didn't hear, oh, he's knocking down every big name's door or anything like that. This ended up, I said in our conversations here, I probably would have gone for a bigger established name, somebody that's been to a Final Four, something like that, personally, because it's just the stature of that job. But that has not been Danny's MO. In his time making hires, he has been a guy that goes and finds that under the radar, up and comer, exciting, that person that's kind of the hidden gem, the secret sauce there. And I think this tracks with the hires that he's made in the past. Kim Caldwell, she comes from Marshall and I was just looking, basically flipped Marshall right around in one season and won the Sun Belt regular season, then won the Sun Belt tournament, made it to the NCAA tournament, won in her past stops, won the MEC tournament 4 times, won the MEC regular season 6 times, was the WBCA National Coach of the Year in 2022. I mean, it has just stacked up accolades at these other levels and now takes over. I think this exactly tracks. Supposedly has a very exciting offense, is kind of a Nate Oates-ish style coach, while also apparently hard-nosed defense too, which is, I mean, if you play those two things, you'll win championships. So I honestly, yes, is it a big name? No, it's not. And a lot of people were wanting that, but it also really answers the question of all those people that were just like, well, who are you going to hire? Do this. This is will it work out? I don't know. It might not, but this fills a bunch of questions that you kind of had here. You were with Kelly. You're playing undisciplined, really not fundamentally solid basketball, no real identity. It seems like Kim Caldwell's teams have a serious identity. She's done a ton of winning. She hadn't been fired in the past, like Kelly had been fired. And this to me, it makes a ton of sense. Obviously, will it work out? We'll see. But I love this. Shake it up. And not, the tough thing will be the recruiting. Make sure that she's able to get 5-star players in here, as all Lady Vols coaches have to this point. But I like it a lot. I think it's great. Great hire.
Yeah, I mean, I think it tracks with what Danny White likes to do. I mean, you mentioned Nate Oates. That's a coach that Danny White hired in the past at Buffalo. So they're kind of like Josh Heupel in a way, like the football version of Josh Heupel. High flying, fast offense, aggressive, wanting to play hard defense. That's the type of coach that Danny White likes to hire. So when Rick Barnes does retire one day, look at those types of coaches. That's going to be what he targets 100%. As far as the hire, I mean, she seems, she's a winner. She's won a lot. Seems excited to be here, kind of understands the expectations, is embracing those expectations. I mean, I think that's when you talked about going out and getting a big name. I mean, this job could be kind of like the Kentucky job, men's job, in a way where you've got to live in the shadow of Pat Summitt no matter what. And while everybody says we don't expect you to be Pat Summitt, no one will ever be Pat Summitt. We all know that, but they're still wanting you to win championships. And you're always going to have that kind of standing over you, like, okay, this is what this program can be. Like, we know that. We can point to this statue out here and we can show you exactly where this program can go. You haven't got anywhere close to that. I can see big name coaches being like, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if I can live through that every single year. She didn't run away from it. She's running towards it. You got to like that aspect of it. As far as how it'll play out, I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier. My stance with coaching hires at this point is just, I don't know. Like, we'll just have to see what happens because there's just so many variables that go into it. You can rationalize it all you want, but until you actually see how they're going to play, how they're going to respond, what kind of energy they play with, if their identity is true to what they want it to be, you just really don't know how to work out. I think it's a good hire based on everything we know. I think, based on Danny White's track record, like, okay, yeah, I think you probably did the best thing for the program that you could with this hire. Now let's see if it pans out. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that probably could have been done was to hire a little bit more of a well-known up and comer. Her ascendance is obviously crazy. She was at Glenville State 2 years ago.
I'd never heard of her before the press release. Like, I don't.
Yes.
Unless you're real deep into women's college basketball, really.
I mean, if this
like,
was,
I could tell you the Marshall's men's coach is.
Yeah.
So
I mean, on the men's side, this is a level of hire where on the men's side I would have been like, who's what?
It's almost like a Donnie Tyndall level, maybe. Because I wasn't familiar with Donnie Tyndall really before all that. It's just not something you pay attention to. It's not super relevant to the basketball that we're watching usually on a nightly basis.
And I think I've said it here before. Danny has a history of kind of trying to make the smartest man in the room hire. This 100% tracks with that. And to this point, the hires that he has made have been, I mean, Josh Heupel. Like, what more do you need to know? We thought that it was a little off the wall, and he turned around and had an 11-win season for you. So, and then a 9-win season. So I think the proof's there. Proof of concept is there for Danny White. And I really hope that they give Kim the resources.
She got to do some portal work.
Oh, man. Yes. No doubt about it at all. And it's not going to be easy. But hopefully, and I'm sure the thought is her coaching style is one where you can get players who aren't as good to probably play above their ability to that point of it being Nate Oates' style. I think he does a lot of that. Like this season, I think he genuinely didn't have that incredible of a roster. Took him to a Final Four. Like that's what you can do.
It's so annoying, isn't it? That he's doing that.
That just makes me so.
I respect his coaching ability, but my goodness,
that they got to a Final Four before Tennessee. It's the stupidest. I hate it so much. I can't stand it. But
again, like you said, it proves Danny White's proof of concept there.
Yes. For sure. We'll see what happens. But in my eyes, as of now, good hire. if you're asking me. All right, Zach. Anything else for the good folks at home before we bounce out of here for another week?
I think that's about it. I'm sure the rest of the week will be crazy. We'll be on Portal Watch.
Oh yeah.
I don't feel like there's any big names from Tennessee. Elijah Herring wasn't shocking, but that's probably, I mean, a big-ish name considering how many snaps he played last season. And he has depth. I mean, no matter what, he is a player that played a lot of football for you last season.
Yep.
Beyond that, I don't, maybe it wouldn't be shocking if one of the wide receivers down the depth chart decides, hey, let's go, seek something up, maybe like Nathan Leacock, who hasn't really developed. And look, that's really not fair to him to say that he hasn't developed yet because he's still really young. I mean, he's a true freshman last season. So, he needs some time. But also, we've seen in the past that those guys, if they're not on the field by their sophomore year or expect to be on the field, they're elsewhere. So it's saw with Walker Merrill and Jimmy Callaway and some of these other guys in the past couple of years. So that would be one that wouldn't totally surprise me. And hopefully they go get a running back. Devin in the comments pointed out that a running back from Oregon State locked in a visit to Tennessee. So clearly Tennessee is looking around and considering that option, and maybe they add someone.
Maybe. We will obviously keep tabs on it, talk about it next Monday. Any and all movement we will be here to discuss. Yeah, I do feel like next week's show is probably going to be a little transfer portal centric, but we'll talk about it all. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, thank you so much to everybody for watching. I do say it every week, but we could not do this show without you in a serious way. We appreciate everybody coming in, commenting, hanging out with us, and listening to the show afterwards too. It means the world. Seriously, we appreciate it so much. And yeah, I think that's it. That's a show. Thanks again to everybody, and we will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.